The princess chose him as her champion, and the empire trembled. The city was alive with a quiet energy, a hum of aircars gliding through the skyways, mechanical helpers tending to the streets, and citizens hurrying to the day's work with a sense of purpose. In the heart of the city, the palace rose like a jewel, its walls adorned with intricate carvings and symbols that told the story of generations of rulers who had guided the kingdom to prominence not through conquest, but through intelligence, innovation, and diplomacy. Kale adjusted the strap of his satchel as he navigated the cobblestone streets toward the central square. His fingers brushed against the small tools and blueprints tucked inside, each carefully organized and ready for the day ahead. Kale was not a man of wealth or high birth. He was a simple inventor from the quieter provinces on the outskirts of the kingdom, known for his clever machines and practical solutions to problems others considered unsolvable. Despite his modesty, Kale carried himself with a quiet confidence, born not from arrogance, but from the steady knowledge that even the smallest idea could change the course of events if applied wisely. The square was bustling more than usual. Merchants called out their wares, children laughed as they played with mechanical toys, and the citizens of Lyrathia paused to watch as royal guards organized the area around a raised platform. Word had spread through the city the night before. Princess Seraphine would make an important announcement that morning. Whispers had already begun, filled with speculation and excitement. Some guessed that a new trade agreement would be announced, others thought a celebration of Lyrathia's technological achievements was forthcoming. Few dared to imagine what the princess might truly unveil. Kale made his way closer to the platform, curious despite himself. The princess had always been admired for her sharp mind, her grace, and her unwavering commitment to the kingdom's ideals. Seraphine did not seek the attention of the court for appearances. Her decisions were deliberate and often bold. Kale, like many others, had wondered what she might do to stir the city this time. As he approached, he noticed a growing crowd, faces turned toward the gleaming figure of the princess as she stepped into the morning light. She wore a simple yet elegant tunic of soft gold and silver threads that shimmered as she moved. Her hair, long and dark, caught the sunlight, framing her face with a quiet brilliance that seemed to command attention without demanding it. Her eyes scanned the crowd, lingering on familiar faces before settling briefly on Kale. A slight, knowing smile touched her lips, but she said nothing. The anticipation in the air was palpable, and the citizens waited, holding their breath, as if the city itself had paused to witness the moment. "People of Lyrathia," she began, her voice clear and steady, carrying to the edges of the square. "Our kingdom has long been guided by wisdom, creativity, and courage. We have faced challenges not with the sword, but with thought, invention, and the strength of our principles. Today, I must make a decision that will carry these values beyond our borders." The crowd leaned in, sensing the gravity of her words. Kale felt a tightening in his chest. He had been in the city long enough to understand that when Seraphine spoke, she did not speak lightly. Every word had meaning, every pause calculated to reach hearts and minds alike. "There is a great assembly coming beyond the stars, where leaders from distant worlds will gather to determine the future of many civilizations. It is a place of diplomacy, intellect, and challenge. Lyrathia must be represented by one who embodies our ideals, one who can meet the minds of the galaxy with courage and creativity." Murmurs ran through the crowd. The interstellar assembly was a legendary event, spoken of in every corner of the kingdom. It was not a contest of armies, but of intellect, strategy, and innovation. Those chosen to attend were typically scholars, renowned scientists, or esteemed diplomats, people whose reputations and accomplishments were already beyond question. Seraphine paused, scanning the crowd once more. "I have made my choice." She allowed the words to settle, letting the weight of the moment linger. Then she spoke a single name, clear and deliberate. "Kale!" Gasps erupted. Whispers turned to shocked exclamations. Kale froze as though the world had tilted on its axis. He looked around, searching for some hint that the princess had not meant him, but every gaze in the crowd was fixed upon him. His heart pounded, a mixture of disbelief, fear, and something else he could not yet name. The princess's eyes met his again, steady and unwavering, and in them he saw trust. She had chosen him. Kale's mind raced. He was an inventor, not a diplomat. He had solved problems with gears, circuits, and reason, not with speeches and alliances. How could he represent Lyrathia among the leaders of other worlds? The thought was overwhelming, and yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination lit within him. If Seraphine believed he could do it, perhaps he could. The princess stepped down from the platform, her presence calm yet commanding. Kale has shown time and again that brilliance and integrity matter more than fame or wealth. He understands that solutions are born from creativity and compassion, not fear. He is the champion I trust to carry Lyrathia's spirit to the assembly. The crowd fell silent, uncertain at first, then slowly, the murmurs of doubt began to mingle with words of admiration. Some saw the wisdom in her choice, others remained skeptical. Kale felt a hand on his shoulder. It was his mentor, a kind-faced inventor named Taryn. "Kale," Taryn said gently, "you have always believed in the power of ideas. Now the galaxy will see what you can do." Kale nodded, swallowing hard. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but he also felt a strange sense of rightness. For the first time, he realized that being chosen was not just about skill, it was about belief. The princess believed in him, and that belief was more powerful than any instruction or accolade. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Kale was introduced to the palace's scholars and diplomats, each eager to brief him on the customs, languages, and technologies of the distant worlds he would soon visit. He studied tirelessly, poring over star charts, alien dialects, and the histories of civilizations he had only read about in books. Seraphine visited often, offering advice, encouragement, and a quiet confidence that steadied Kale's nerves. "You do not need to be perfect," she told him one evening as they walked the palace gardens. "You only need to be yourself, and that, Kale, is enough." Despite the preparation, doubt never fully left him. Kale spent nights staring at the stars, imagining the vast assembly of beings who would judge him, his kingdom, and his ideas. He thought of the Empire, a neighboring power whose leaders valued dominance over dialogue, strength over reason. Rumors whispered that they would attempt to intimidate or undermine Lyrathia's representative. Kale shivered at the thought, but he also felt a growing determination. He would not meet the galaxy with fear. He would meet it with thought, with invention, with integrity. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The city gathered once more at the palace gates to watch as the princess and her champion boarded the sleek starship that would carry them beyond the kingdom and into the stars. The vessel gleamed under the morning sun, its surface polished to a mirror shine. Kale stepped aboard, carrying not just his tools and plans, but the weight of expectation, trust, and hope. As the engines roared to life, lifting them into the sky, Kale glanced at Seraphine. Her expression was calm, her eyes bright with quiet pride. He took a deep breath, letting the excitement and fear mingle. The city of Lyrathia receded below them, a patchwork of spires, gardens, and bustling streets, a reminder of all they stood to represent. The galaxy awaited, vast and unknown, filled with challenges and possibilities beyond imagining. Kale realized something as the stars stretched into streaks of light outside the ship's windows. This journey was not just about winning a contest or representing a kingdom. It was about proving that human ingenuity, compassion, and courage could shine even in the vastness of space. He thought of the inventions he had built, the problems he had solved, the quiet victories of everyday life. Perhaps they were small, but they were real. And realness, Kale understood, was the foundation of true power. Seraphine reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Kale looked at her, then at the stars ahead, and nodded. "I am," he said, with a confidence that surprised even him. "Let us show them who we are." The starship glided into the void, carrying with it the hopes of a kingdom, the spark of human brilliance, and a young inventor who would soon learn that even the humblest mind could shake the universe. Not with violence, but with thought, courage, and heart. The journey had begun, and the Empire, far away, would tremble not at weapons, but at the quiet strength of a champion chosen not for power, but for wisdom. The starship glided silently through the velvet darkness of space, its engines emitting a gentle hum that resonated through the cabin. Kale leaned against the observation deck's glass, staring at the stars stretching into lines of light as the ship accelerated toward distant systems. Despite the serene beauty, his mind buzzed with questions. How would he communicate with beings whose languages he barely understood? How could he represent his kingdom among minds that had mastered sciences and arts far beyond Lyrathia's experience? The weight of responsibility pressed down, but beneath it, a sense of wonder had begun to grow. Princess Seraphine joined him at the deck, her presence calm and steady. She leaned against the rail, her eyes reflecting the distant glimmers of stars. "Are you feeling overwhelmed?" she asked softly. Kale shook his head, though he did not speak immediately. "A little," he admitted. It's just that everything out there is unknown, and I'm supposed to be the one to prove that Lyrathia belongs among them." Seraphine smiled, a small curve of understanding and reassurance. "Kale, the Assembly does not expect perfection. It expects honesty, clarity, and creativity. You are human, and you think in ways no other species can. That is your strength." He nodded slowly, trying to internalize her words. It was easy to feel small when facing the vastness of space or the complexity of civilizations that span galaxies. But Seraphine's confidence reminded him that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. Their first stop was a planet called Yalura, a hub of interstellar travel where delegates from distant worlds frequently gathered before the Assembly. As the starship descended, Kale saw sprawling cities built into the sides of floating cliffs, luminous bridges spanning vast chasms, and airborne machines weaving through the air like fish in a river. The planet was alive with innovation, a place where every structure, device, and street seemed designed to reflect harmony between technology and environment. Kale felt a thrill of inspiration. If these worlds could create such wonders, what else was possible when intellect and cooperation guided action? He realized that his inventions, modest though they might seem in comparison, were not insignificant. Every creative solution, no matter how small, could resonate across vast distances and impact countless lives. The princess guided him through the bustling spaceport, introducing him to scholars, engineers, and diplomats. Their discussions were intricate, filled with technical terms, complex equations, and ideas that Kale had only glimpsed in books. At first, he struggled to follow, feeling the familiar unease of being a novice. But he listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and offered solutions when he could. To his surprise, the aliens and scholars responded with curiosity, some even delight, at his practical approaches and inventive thinking. One evening, Kale was called to assist with a mechanical problem on a nearby vessel that had malfunctioned. The crew was stranded temporarily in orbit, unable to continue their journey to the Assembly. While the engineers of Yalura debated theoretical approaches, Kale quietly examined the engine, observing the patterns and movements of the components. After a few hours, he proposed a simple adjustment that redirected energy flow and stabilized the system. The vessel hummed to life again, its crew applauding Kale's ingenuity. The experience brought a deep sense of accomplishment. Kale realized that creativity and observation often mattered more than technical knowledge alone. His mind worked differently, not faster, but in a way that connected seemingly unrelated pieces to form practical solutions. Seraphine's words echoed in his mind. His way of thinking was his strength, and now he was beginning to understand it. As the days passed, Kale and Seraphine continued their journey, moving from planet to planet. Each world was unique. One had cities built entirely on water, where floating platforms and living spaces moved with the currents. Another had sprawling crystalline forests that emitted light and energy, creating natural networks that powered entire cities. Kale absorbed everything, sketching ideas, asking questions, and quietly inventing solutions to problems that no one else had even considered. But not all encounters were simple. Some delegates from distant worlds approached Kale with skepticism. They were used to seeing representatives chosen for fame, wealth, or military power. A humble inventor from a relatively small kingdom seemed an unlikely candidate to them. Kale felt their doubt, their subtle tests of his knowledge and intellect, and he realized that to earn respect, he would have to rely on clarity, creativity, and patience rather than status or intimidation. On one particularly challenging day, Kale and Seraphine visited a planet known as Vierlia, famous for its vast orbital gardens and scholars who specialized in energy manipulation. The Vierlians presented a complex puzzle. A network of energy conduits that powered their floating city had begun to destabilize, threatening the entire structure. Kale examined the problem, walking along the floating pathways and observing the flow of energy. After hours of careful study, he suggested a small modification in the configuration of the conduits that redistributed energy more evenly. The Vierlians watched, astonished, as the system stabilized and the gardens glowed with renewed life. Seraphine stood beside him, her expression quietly proud. "You see, Kale, you do not need to force your way. You simply need to think, observe, and act with integrity. That is what sets you apart." Kale smiled, feeling a warmth he had not expected. Each success, however small, was a step toward proving that his approach, thoughtful, practical, and human-centered, was as powerful as any reputation or title. He began to understand that the assembly was not about defeating others. It was about showing that cooperation, creativity, and honesty were stronger than intimidation, fear, or aggression. Despite the growing confidence, Kale could sense the tension building. Word had reached them that the Empire, a powerful neighboring power known for its dominance and strategic cunning, was watching Lyrathia closely. Their representatives had already arrived at the assembly, and rumors suggested they would attempt to unsettle the kingdom's champion. Kale's heart tightened at the thought. He was not trained for confrontation in the way soldiers might be. His tools were his mind, his ideas, and his ingenuity. Yet he knew that these could be just as formidable. The journey also gave Kale the chance to grow personally. He learned to navigate alien customs, to interpret unspoken communication, and to find common ground even with those who initially doubted him. Seraphine remained a steady guide, never imposing her will but offering insight when he needed it. Their partnership deepened, not through authority or command, but through mutual respect and shared purpose. Kale realized that being a champion meant more than representing a kingdom. It meant understanding others, bridging differences, and showing that humans could inspire trust and admiration through intellect and kindness. On a quiet night aboard the starship, Kale sat alone in his quarters, sketching ideas for a new device that could assist in communication across languages. He thought about the challenges ahead, the assembly, and the Empire's potential strategies. Despite the uncertainty, he felt a sense of readiness growing inside him. He was not just a visitor in the galaxy. He was an active participant, capable of contributing solutions, forming alliances, and representing the best of Lyrathia's values. The next morning, the starship entered the orbit of the Assembly's gathering world, a planet named Orevan. The city stretched across vast plains, its architecture a mix of crystalline structures, floating platforms, and shimmering energy fields. Delegates from countless civilizations had already begun to arrive, each representing their worlds with symbols of culture, achievement, and intellect. The sight was both overwhelming and inspiring. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the energy of the assembly before even stepping onto the planet's surface. He thought of his home, of Lyrathia's silver spires and bustling streets, and of the people who had trusted him with this responsibility. The weight of expectation was heavy, but it was accompanied by a growing sense of purpose. He realized that his journey was no longer just about proving himself. It was about proving that humanity, with its creativity, compassion, and courage, had a place among the stars. Seraphine turned to him as the ship landed, her eyes steady and encouraging. "Remember, Kale, it is not about overpowering others. It is about showing what we can achieve together. Your mind, your ideas, your heart, these are your strengths." Kale nodded, gripping the railing for a moment before stepping forward. The ramp descended, and he set foot on Orevan, the crowd of delegates greeting them with curious glances. Some were skeptical, some indifferent, and others already intrigued by the stories of Lyrathia's humble champion. Kale felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but also a quiet determination. He realized something crucial as he walked through the assembly grounds. The galaxy did not fear those who relied on thought and creativity. It respected them, and perhaps in time it would even follow them. As Kale and Seraphine moved deeper into the assembly, meeting delegates, discussing challenges, and exchanging ideas, he understood that the journey was just beginning. The galaxy was vast, its cultures intricate, and its problems complex. Yet he also knew that with observation, creativity, and integrity, he could face any challenge. Kale's mind swirled with possibilities, inventions, and strategies, not for war, but for understanding. And as the twin suns of Orevan set over the crystalline city, casting brilliant colors across the sky, he felt something he had never felt before. A quiet certainty that he could not only survive this journey but also inspire change, showing the galaxy the true strength of humanity. The Empire, Kale thought as he watched the stars reflect off the crystal towers. would soon realize that Lyrathia's champion did not rely on fear, weapons, or domination. He relied on thought, ingenuity, and the unshakable belief that intelligence and compassion could alter the course of worlds. And that, Cale knew, was far more formidable than any army. The first morning at the Interstellar Assembly brought a strange mixture of awe and tension. Cale awoke to the soft hum of energy fields surrounding the delegate city, feeling the weight of anticipation pressing gently on his chest. From his window, he could see the vast plaza below, where beings from countless worlds moved in an intricate dance of culture, color, and light. Some floated gracefully on levitation platforms, others scuttled on multiple limbs, and some shimmered like living starlight, their forms barely distinguishable as creatures at all. It was a sight that could overwhelm anyone, yet Cale felt a spark of excitement. He had come this far, and now the true challenge would begin. Seraphine appeared at the doorway, carrying a small satchel filled with data pads, notes, and sketches Cale had prepared during the journey. Her expression was serene, and Cale could sense her quiet confidence, the kind that had carried him from the city of Lyrathia to the edge of the galaxy. "Today begins the assembly," she said softly. "Remember what I told you. Observation, understanding, and creativity are your tools. Let them guide you." Cale nodded, his fingers tightening around the strap of his satchel. The assembly was a place of intellect, strategy, and diplomacy. Unlike competitions of skill or combat, this gathering tested the ability to reason, to solve complex problems, and to build connections across cultures. And the Empire's representatives, he had heard, were already watching closely, curious, and perhaps wary of the unassuming human chosen by Seraphine. The first session was a series of presentations. Each delegate would introduce themselves and their world, sharing achievements, technologies, and philosophies. Cale listened intently, absorbing the details of each culture. There were cities that floated on magnetic fields, civilizations that communicated through light patterns, and societies that had harnessed the energy of entire stars to power their technology. It was dazzling and sometimes intimidating, yet Cale noticed a pattern. Despite the incredible differences, every society faced similar challenges: how to sustain resources, how to foster cooperation, and how to solve problems without harming others. When it was his turn, Cale felt his pulse quicken. He stepped forward, careful not to let his nerves show. The room seemed to quiet in anticipation. Delegates leaned forward, their many forms and expressions curious and attentive. Cale opened his data pad, displaying a simple diagram he had prepared. A device that could translate languages and symbols in real time, bridging gaps between cultures and allowing true understanding. He spoke clearly, using simple words, carefully explaining the concept. He described how the device worked, how it would learn patterns from each culture, and how it could foster cooperation rather than miscommunication. As he demonstrated its function, the room grew quiet, then gradually, the murmurs of approval began. Delegates exchanged nods, some leaning closer to inspect the sketches, others asking thoughtful questions. The Empire's representatives observed silently. They had expected a display of diplomacy, perhaps, but Cale's demonstration was different. It did not rely on power or authority. It relied on creativity, logic, and the human capacity to connect. Cale realized then that he was not competing in the traditional sense. He was showing what it meant to be human, inventive, ethical, and persistent. Throughout the day, Cale continued to meet other delegates, often encountering skepticism. Some were used to leaders chosen for status or military strength. They asked challenging questions, testing Cale's knowledge of science, ethics, and strategy. He answered as best he could, sometimes stumbling, sometimes surprising even himself with the solutions he devised on the spot. Often the answers were not the most complex, but they were practical and considerate, designed to benefit all parties rather than a single nation or species. One of the most striking moments occurred during a session on resource sharing. Several worlds were experiencing shortages of critical materials, and tensions ran high. Cale noticed a pattern in the distribution of resources. Inefficiencies and miscommunications had created problems that could be solved through coordination rather than competition. Quietly, he sketched a simple algorithm on his pad, one that reorganized trade routes, energy flow, and production schedules to maximize efficiency while minimizing waste. When he presented it to the council, There was an audible pause. Delegates murmured among themselves, then began nodding, some even clapping quietly. The Empire's representatives were not smiling, their brows furrowed. Kale understood that he had achieved something important. He had demonstrated that intellect and empathy could resolve issues that brute force or intimidation could not. During breaks, Kale walked through the assembly halls with Seraphine, observing interactions among the delegates. He saw cultures exchanging gifts of knowledge, machines, and art, learning from one another and building mutual respect. The environment was unlike anything Kale had imagined. It was not a competition in the sense of winners and losers. It was a test of ingenuity, creativity, and the ability to inspire collaboration. And in that, he realized he had an advantage. Kale also began to understand the subtle strategies of the Empire. Their representatives were masters of persuasion, often attempting to dominate conversations with authority and elaborate displays of technology. Yet Kale noticed that their solutions, though impressive, often ignored the human or alien element, the need for trust, understanding, and cooperation. Where the Empire relied on spectacle, Kale relied on clarity, practicality, and empathy. Slowly, he began to see how even the most powerful forces could be challenged without confrontation, simply by demonstrating competence, integrity, and creativity. As the days progressed, Kale's confidence grew, but so did the complexity of the challenges. One session involved a simulated disaster scenario, a planet threatened by sudden environmental changes that could disrupt ecosystems, cities, and energy networks. Delegates were asked to propose strategies to prevent catastrophe. Many presented elaborate machines or energy shields, but Kale studied the patterns carefully. He realized that the solution did not require massive power, but understanding the natural cycles and working with them. Kale proposed a network of monitoring devices, simple yet adaptable, that could predict shifts in the environment and suggest adjustments to energy distribution, agriculture, and water management. His approach emphasized cooperation with natural systems rather than imposing force upon them. When he demonstrated the effectiveness of his system, the delegates reacted with genuine amazement. They saw that solutions could be both elegant and sustainable, practical and considerate of all involved. Throughout these sessions, Kale also discovered his own resilience. The challenges were long, often stretching through hours of discussion, calculation, and negotiation. He learned to pace himself, to listen before acting, and to trust his instincts even when others doubted him. Seraphine's quiet support never wavered. She reminded him that being a champion was not about immediate praise or recognition. It was about consistent effort, thoughtful action, and the courage to try, even when success was uncertain. One evening, after a particularly long day, Kale and Seraphine sat on a terrace overlooking the city. The twin moons of Orevan cast a gentle glow over the crystalline structures, turning them into a landscape of light and shadow. Kale felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "I never imagined this would be so intense," he said, leaning back against the railing. Seraphine smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Every journey worth taking is intense, Kale. You are learning not just to solve problems, but to see the world in ways others cannot. That is the true measure of a champion." Kale thought about the Empire again. He realized that they would continue to challenge him, that they would attempt to assert dominance in subtle ways. But he also understood that he did not need to match their displays of power. His strength lay in thought, in connection, and in the quiet confidence that careful reasoning and empathy could achieve what intimidation never could. The next day brought a new challenge, the creation of a collaborative project involving multiple worlds. Delegates were tasked with designing a sustainable energy network that could share resources fairly and efficiently. The task was complex, involving diverse technologies, languages, and priorities. Kale immediately saw the potential for misunderstanding and conflict. Rather than asserting dominance, he proposed a method of coordination, a central hub where data from all worlds could be integrated and analyzed, allowing each participant to contribute according to their strengths and resources. The Empire's representatives were initially dismissive, suggesting that Kale's system was too simple, too reliant on cooperation rather than command. But Kale demonstrated its functionality using a simulation, showing how efficiency, fairness, and sustainability could all be achieved. Gradually, even the skeptics began to see the logic. By the end of the day, Kale's model was widely accepted as the most promising approach. The sessions at the assembly revealed another truth to Kale. Leadership was not about dominance, nor was it about brilliance alone. It was about listening, understanding, and fostering collaboration. Every problem, no matter how complex, had a solution when approached with patience, empathy, and creativity. Kale began to see his role not as a solitary hero, but as a facilitator of ideas, a connector of minds and cultures. As Part 3 drew to a close, Kale's confidence had grown. The Empire's representatives remained powerful and skilled, yet their strategies of intimidation and spectacle were gradually losing their impact. Kale's victories were quiet but significant. Practical solutions, honest communication, and the demonstration that humans could contribute to the galaxy not with force, but with thought and integrity. That night, Kale and Seraphine stood on the terrace once more, looking at the glittering city below. The challenges were far from over, but Kale felt a deep sense of purpose. He understood now that being a champion was not about immediate recognition or even winning contests. It was about showing the galaxy the strength of human creativity, patience, and compassion. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the quiet excitement of possibility. The Empire might be watching, skeptical and calculating, but he knew one truth. They would tremble not at weapons, but at ideas, ingenuity, and the steady courage of a mind willing to act with clarity and conscience. And that, Kale realized, was the most powerful form of strength there could be. The city of Orevan shimmered under the twin suns as the final day of the interstellar assembly approached. Kale stood at the edge of the central plaza, gazing at the crystalline towers and the flowing energy lines that connected each building like a living circuit. The air was electric with anticipation. Delegates from dozens of worlds had gathered, their conversations a blend of alien tones, lights, and movements. Kale could sense the weight of the moment. This was not a day for simple demonstrations or minor projects. This was the culmination of weeks of discussion, invention, and collaboration, a test that would define not only the assembly's results, but also the reputation of each participating world. Princess Seraphine stood beside him, her calm presence grounding him. "This is it, Kale," she said softly. "The final challenge. Remember everything you've learned. Observation, patience, and clarity will guide you as much as any device or calculation." Kale nodded, feeling the mix of excitement and nervousness he had come to know so well. Over the past weeks, he had solved mechanical problems, bridged communication gaps, and demonstrated that human creativity could compete with civilizations far older and more technologically advanced than Lyrathia. Now the final task loomed. The assembly required each delegate to present a collaborative solution to a galactic-scale problem, one that would affect multiple systems and millions of lives. The problem was revealed in dramatic fashion. A cluster of star systems on the edge of known space faced a potential collapse of energy resources. The delicate balance of power, resources, and ecosystems had created instability, threatening the prosperity of countless worlds. The assembly challenged delegates to devise a solution that would stabilize energy flow, ensure fairness among civilizations, and allow sustainable development for generations to come. Delegates whispered and muttered, calculating, debating, and proposing grand schemes. Machines of enormous size and complexity were suggested, energy fields reconfigured, and algorithms devised. Kale observed quietly, taking careful notes. The solution was not simply about power. It was about understanding relationships, dependencies, and priorities. He could see patterns that others overlooked. Energy distribution was uneven not because of lack of technology, but because communication and trust between worlds were weak. Kale began to sketch an idea on his pad. It was simple in appearance but elegant in its function. A central hub would act as a coordinator, integrating real-time data from every world in the cluster. Each planet could input its resources, needs, and capacities. The system would calculate fair allocations, suggest improvements, and allow each world to act autonomously while maintaining balance across the cluster. Kale's solution emphasized collaboration over control, understanding over domination. When he presented the idea, there was a moment of silence. Delegates studied the diagrams and simulations, running calculations on their own devices. Then questions began. How would the system handle unexpected fluctuations? Could it adapt to new participants? What about differences in energy technology and cultural practices? Kale responded calmly, explaining the adaptive algorithms, the communication protocols, and the safeguards he had designed. He emphasized the flexibility of the system, its ability to learn, and the ethical principles that guided it. The Empire's representatives observed with careful scrutiny. Their expressions were unreadable, but Kale sensed their skepticism. They had relied on force, authority, and intimidation to secure their interests for generations. This system, based on cooperation and intelligence, was unfamiliar. Kale understood that their unease was growing. They had underestimated what a human mind, guided by creativity and ethics, could accomplish. Hours passed as delegates tested the system, adjusting variables, running simulations, and exploring its potential. Gradually, consensus began to form. Worlds that had been at odds found that Kale's hub allowed them to meet their needs without disadvantaging others. Energy flow stabilized in simulations, and cooperation replaced rivalry. Kale realized that the assembly was not about defeating others, but about creating solutions that benefited all. His ideas were not only accepted, they were celebrated. Throughout the process, Kale continued to learn. He observed cultural behaviors, understanding how subtle differences affected negotiations and decision-making. He noticed that the Empire's representatives, despite their attempts at dominance, were beginning to respect the logic and fairness of his proposals. Kale did not gloat, did not seek to humiliate or overpower. He focused on clarity, integrity, and the practical benefits of collaboration. Slowly, even the most skeptical delegates began to see the value of a champion who led through intellect and principle rather than authority. Princess Seraphine stayed close, offering quiet guidance when Kale paused to consider complex details. "Remember, Kale," she said, "true leadership is not about who shouts the loudest or demonstrates the most power. It is about enabling others to succeed while ensuring fairness and understanding." By mid-afternoon, Kale's system had been fully tested and validated. Delegates from every participating world confirmed its effectiveness and praised its simplicity, adaptability, and fairness. Murmurs of admiration spread through the assembly, and Kale noticed the Empire's representatives exchanging uncertain glances. They had witnessed the quiet power of human ingenuity, an approach that solved problems without force, inspired trust, and fostered cooperation across species. Kale felt a surge of pride, tempered with humility. He had not achieved this alone. The lessons of his journey, the guidance of Seraphine, and the trust of Lyrathia had carried him to this moment. He realized that being a champion was not about recognition or victory alone. It was about contributing something meaningful, something that would endure long after the assembly concluded. As the session concluded, delegates gathered to discuss the outcomes. Kale watched as representatives praised the fairness and practicality of his system. Several worlds even offered to adopt elements of it immediately, eager to implement the collaborative framework across other clusters. Kale realized then that the true impact of his work was only beginning. It would ripple through civilizations, influencing policies, trade, and cooperation for years to come. The Empire's representatives approached him quietly afterward. One of them, a tall figure with metallic-toned skin and luminous eyes, spoke in measured tones. "Your system, it is remarkable," the delegate said. "We expected resistance or delay. Instead, you have demonstrated that a single mind, guided by clarity and cooperation, can achieve what our fleets and authority cannot." Kale smiled politely, feeling the subtle acknowledgement of respect. "It is not about one mind," he replied. "It is about collaboration and understanding. If we work together, the solutions are always greater than any individual or empire." The delegate nodded slowly, their expression thoughtful. "Perhaps we have underestimated the human way," they said quietly, a hint of admiration in their tone. "Your kingdom has shown wisdom, integrity, and strength without force. That is a lesson we will remember." Kale realized that this acknowledgement, quiet though it was, carried far more weight than applause or accolades. The Empire, long accustomed to asserting dominance, had witnessed the power of intellect, creativity, and ethical action. It was a victory not of confrontation, but of demonstration, a testament to the human ability to inspire, to solve, and to connect. As the assembly drew to a close, Kale and Seraphine stood once more on a balcony overlooking the city. The setting suns cast long shadows over crystalline towers, turning the streets below into a mosaic of light. Delegates moved among the halls, exchanging ideas, forming alliances, and celebrating the accomplishments of the past weeks. Kale felt a profound sense of fulfillment. "You have done more than I imagined," Seraphine said softly. "You have shown the galaxy what it means to lead with intelligence, courage, and compassion. They will remember this." Kale smiled, feeling a quiet warmth spread through him. "I only did what I thought was right," he said. "I wanted to solve problems, not create conflict. I wanted to show that humans can contribute in ways that matter." Seraphine's eyes shone with pride. "And you have. You have reminded the galaxy that strength is not measured by force, but by thought, by creativity, and by the courage to act with integrity." That evening, the delegates gathered for the closing ceremony. Kale stood beside Seraphine as representatives from every world spoke of cooperation, shared accomplishments, and new initiatives inspired by the assembly. The energy was celebratory yet profound. Kale realized that he had not only represented Lyrathia, but he had become a symbol of human potential, a reminder that intellect, ethics, and collaboration could achieve what armies and empires alone never could. The Empire's representatives, once skeptical, now offered nods of respect, acknowledging that their methods were not the only path to success. Kale understood that the seeds of change had been planted. By showing what humans could achieve without violence, intimidation, or arrogance, he had shifted perceptions, altered expectations, and inspired a new way of thinking across the galaxy. As the ceremony concluded, Kale and Seraphine returned to the starship that would carry them back to Lyrathia. The journey home felt lighter than the journey out. They had accomplished something remarkable, not only for their kingdom, but for the galaxy as a whole. Kale felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the lessons of the assembly would ripple outward, shaping minds, inspiring innovation, and fostering understanding across worlds. Kale leaned against the observation deck, watching stars streak past as the ship accelerated toward home. He thought of Lyrathia's silver spires, the bustling streets, and the citizens who had trusted him with this mission. He realized that being chosen as a champion had not been a matter of luck or favoritism. It had been a test of courage, ingenuity, and integrity. And in that test, he had discovered his true strength. Seraphine joined him once more, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The Empire may have trembled at first," she said softly, "but they now understand that true power lies in thought, in creativity, and in integrity. You have shown them what it means to lead without fear, Kale." Kale nodded, a quiet smile on his face. "I hope they remember it," he said. "Not for us, but for the future, so that collaboration, understanding, and creativity can guide the galaxy instead of fear." The starship glided through the cosmos, carrying a princess, her champion, and the promise of a new era, one where intellect, compassion, and courage would shape the destiny of worlds. Kale knew that the journey had changed him forever. He had discovered that strength was not measured in dominance, but in the quiet power of thought, integrity, and the courage to act with clarity and purpose. And so, as the stars stretched endlessly before him, Kale smiled, ready to return to Lyrathia, ready to continue building a world and a galaxy where ideas could shine brighter than any weapon, and where the tremble of empires came not from fear, but from the recognition of what humanity could achieve. The galaxy had witnessed the quiet triumph of a humble inventor. The empire had trembled not from violence, but from the brilliance of intellect, the courage of conviction, and the strength of integrity. And Kale understood at last that this was only the beginning. The princess chose him as her champion, and the empire trembled,